Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again, taking a whole stack of sources, pulling out the key insights, and basically handing them straight to you, our very well-informed listeners.
That's the plan.
Today, we're looking into the very beginnings of the political journey of a name that just looms large in 20th century history, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Now, most of us, when we hear that name, we immediately think of, nation building, partition, monumental events. But how did this really pivotal figure actually start his public life?
Right. Where did it all begin?
Exactly. We're going to try and peel back some of those layers today, explore his initial steps into the public arena. We'll trace his path from being this really celebrated barrister in Bombay to becoming a kind of nascent political force in early 20th century India.
That's a fascinating period.
It really is. Our sources suggest that the Jinnah we often picture, the leader of a major movement, well, that image often overshadows the earlier man. Today, we're aiming for a more, maybe nuanced understanding, looking at his foundational political beliefs, his quite unique personal style, and the principles that really guided those first steps. Try to picture Bombay at the turn of the century. It's vibrant, it's bustling, it's this hub where you've got the grandeur of colonial power meeting these first real stirrings of political consciousness among Indians.
A real crucible.
Absolutely. And in this city, Jinnah was already a formidable presence, but in the legal world, he was revered, apparently, for his discipline, precision, and unwavering honesty in the courts. His reputation was solid.
Yes, quite remarkable for a young lawyer.
But it seems, for a mind like his, so sharp, so ambitious, the courtroom, even with all its intellectual challenges, just wasn't enough. It wasn't big enough for his aspirations. His path seemed destined for, well, a broader stage.
A bigger arena.
Precisely. So, okay, let's unpack this. What was it that truly drove his transition from this meticulous world of legal arguments to the, let's face it, often messy and unpredictable halls of the Indian National Congress?
And that's exactly what we're aiming to unravel in this deep dive. Our mission today is pretty clear. We want to understand Jinnah's core motivations for even stepping into politics in the first place.
Right.
Then his initial alignment within the Indian National Congress. Where did he fit? How did he develop that quite distinctive early communication style? And crucially, what was his initial vision for India's future, particularly his foundational stance on Hindu-Muslim unity?
Which is so key to understanding him.
Absolutely. We've been digging through historical accounts, really focusing on sources that explore Jinnah's political debut, first steps in Congress, to get a real grasp on how this formative period, well, it's essentially laid the groundwork for everything that came later, his more widely known actions and positions.
It sets the stage.
It really does. And for you, the learner, this deep dive hopefully offers a kind of shortcut, a way to understand the genesis, the very origins of a critical figure in history, revealing not just what he did early on, but why it mattered then, and maybe what those early choices can still tell us today about leadership, about political evolution. It's about understanding the roots, before we start examining the branches and the leaves of the tree. So yeah, let's start right there, at that pivotal moment. Why would a successful, highly respected lawyer, someone at the top of their game, choose to leave the comfort, the predictability of the courtroom for the often chaotic and uncertain world of politics?
It is a fascinating question, isn't it? Because by the dawn of the 20th century, Muhammad Ali Jinnah wasn't just any barrister in Bombay. He was becoming the barrister, a real rising star. His reputation for sort of forensic brilliance was already quite well established.
He had made his mark.
Definitely. Our sources describe him as a promising young barrister, really known for his discipline, precision, and an almost unwavering honesty. Qualities that, commanded respect in any legal setting back then.
And probably still do.
Probably still do, yes. Yet, for a man with his kind of intellect, his ambition, the confines of legal practice, however prestigious, however mentally stimulating it might have been, eventually seemed insufficient. He was, as the material suggests, almost naturally prepared for something bigger, a public arena where the destiny of millions would be debated. You get the sense this wasn't just looking for a new job, it felt more like a calling for a mind trained to argue, to persuade, and ultimately to shape outcomes on a national scale.
Right. The skills were transferable, but the stage was much, much larger.
Exactly. And when you really think about the context that colonial India at that precise moment, there were, admittedly, certain expectations for the educated elite, especially successful lawyers. Many did transition into public life, it's true.
It was a common path to some extent.
It was. But the question is, was Jinnah's move just him following that path, a natural progression for someone of his class and education? Or did his particular blend of intellect and ambition really set him apart? Did it signal something more profound was driving him?
That's the core of it, isn't it?
I think so. The way the sources talk about his legal skill, it's not just as a successful career, but as a preparation for something larger. You can almost picture it, can't you? The intense legal battles, the meticulous analysis of evidence, the sheer intellectual rigor needed to be a top barrister in the complex British colonial legal
It
system.
requires incredible focus.
Incredible focus. Now think about how that training, that precise analytical mind, that commitment to process and logic might translate to the political stage.
Yeah.
The stakes there, though, infinitely higher. Not just individual cases, but the future of a whole nation. This wasn't a man just looking for a change of scenery. He was looking for a bigger canvas for his talents. So standing at that crossroads, what were the deeper currents, the fundamental principles pushing him onto that grander and frankly more perilous stage?
You've really hit on the key distinction there. It wasn't just a career change. It was driven by principle. Jinnah's decision wasn't impulsive. It seems to have been rooted in three specific interlinked reasons that tell us a lot about him.
Okay.
The first, and maybe the most formative, was his time in London. His exposure to London's politics while he was a student.
Ah, yes, his law studies.
Exactly. But he wasn't just buried in books. He was apparently a very keen observer of the British Parliament. He spent time watching the House of Commons debates, seeing firsthand how parliamentary procedure worked, how laws were made, how negotiation could actually shape national policy.
So practical observation.
Very practical. And this experience seems to have embedded in him this deep, almost unshakable belief in constitutional methods. He saw it as the legitimate, the effective way to achieve political change. It wasn't just theory for him. It was a living process he witnessed. It gave him a kind of blueprint.
Right. He saw a system, albeit a colonial one, functioning through debate and law.
Precisely. Then secondly, you absolutely cannot ignore the context back in India. The undeniable national awakening that was sweeping across the subcontinent around the turn of the century.
A powerful force.
Immense. It was a time of intense political ferment. You had this growing chorus of demands, calls for more representation on governing councils, demands for fairness in how the British ran things, calls for significant reforms. It was getting louder, more organized.
The pressure was building.
It really was. And Jinnah, with his sharp mind and what seems to have been a growing sense of civic duty, felt this compelling urge to get involved, to contribute. He wasn't the type to just watch from the sidelines or, just focus on his own successful practice. He felt a personal responsibility to join this movement that was shaping India's future.
He felt he had something to offer.
Exactly. Which leads us to the third pillar, his lawyer's conviction. Jinnah held this firm, unwavering belief that the rights of Indians could, and crucially should, be secured through constitutional struggle.
Through the system, essentially.
Through legal and political channels, yes. Through reasoned debate, through petitions, not through violence or chaos, which he seemed to view as counterproductive and, well, unlawful. For him, politics was almost an extension of law, but on a national scale, a structured, logical way to achieve justice and progress for everyone.
That's a key insight.
It really reveals something fundamental about his disposition, doesn't it? A preference for order, logic, due process over, say, revolutionary fervor or purely emotional appeals. He valued the well-argued case, the established procedure. It does make you wonder, does a background so steeped in law naturally lean you towards a certain type of politics? One that values process, precedent, maybe incremental change.
It seems plausible.
It certainly seems true for Jinnah. It positioned him quite differently from some of the more fiery, radical voices in the nationalist movement at the time. His belief in constitutional struggle wasn't just a tactic, it felt like a core principle. So this wasn't about personal ambition for power, not primarily anyway, but about applying legal principles to national problems. And these very principles pointed him directly towards a specific group within the Indian National Congress.
It's so clear how his background shaped that entry. It wasn't random. It was a very considered, principled move. And once he decided to step onto that bigger stage, the main gateway, as you said, and as our sources confirm, was the Indian National Congress.
The main platform.
The main platform, yes. He officially joined in 1906, but it wasn't like he just showed up one day. He'd been watching, advising, engaging with its ideas for a while before that. The Congress, founded back in 1885, really was the key political organization for India's educated elite at the time. The lawyers, the reformers, the activists. It was the central place where they could collectively voice demands for reform from the British Raj.
The focus point for political energy.
Absolutely. And for Jinnah, joining wasn't just like joining a club. It was the most significant, most respected platform for Indian nationalism. It offered a legitimate channel for political expression. Sources stress it was not simply a political club, but an arena.
I like that word, arena.
Me too. It suggests a space for testing ideals, for honing discipline, for putting that belief in constitutional methods into practice against a powerful empire. It evokes that sense of intellectual combat like the courtroom, but as you said, on a much grander scale, affecting millions. And the Congress itself, especially early on, was this diverse collection of intellectuals, professionals. Not quite the mass movement it later became.
More of an elite body initially.
Exactly, a place of really vibrant debate. But importantly, it wasn't monolithic, not at all. It was actually this lively, sometimes contentious debate hall with deeply different views on the best way forward for India.
You're absolutely right. The Congress was far from unified in its approach. It was really dominated by two broad factions, each with a pretty different core philosophy about how to deal with the British and achieve India's goals.
The famous split.
The famous split, yes.
Yeah.
On one side, you had the moderates. These were figures who really believed in gradual reform.
Yeah.
They advocated for keeping lines of communication open with the British, presenting their demands through carefully argued constitutional petitions, and basically working within the existing system, however flawed, to achieve incremental progress. Patience, persuasion, maybe a lingering belief in British fair play. That was their approach.
Evolution, not revolution.
Exactly. Then on the other side, you had the extremists. This group, often associated with leaders like the very dynamic Bal Gangadhar Tilak, wanted faster change. They were becoming quite disillusioned with the slow pace of reform and were much less inclined to rely on polite requests. They demanded Swaraj self-rule as a birthright, and they championed more direct action. Things like boycotting British goods, promoting national education, really fostering a more assertive, confrontational brand of nationalism.
A much more direct challenge.
A much more direct challenge. Now, given everything we've said about Jinnah, his legal background, his belief in constitutionalism, his London observations, it's probably not surprising that he naturally aligned with the moderates.
It makes perfect sense.
It really does.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a casual choice. It was a deep philosophical fit. His conviction that law, reasoned argument, and structured incremental change was the most effective and principled path forward resonated perfectly with the moderate approach. His whole view of politics as law applied nationally just aligned perfectly there. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights something important. Even in the early days of big nationalist movements, how the method can be just as divisive as the ultimate goal. Jinnah's choice reveals the consistent strategy rooted in legalism, in incrementalism. It clearly separates the idea of constitutional petitions from more confrontational approaches. These were distinct paths.
His alignment wasn't purely intellectual or ideological, was it? There was a personal connection, too, a really important one.
That's right. It became deeply personal, largely thanks to one towering figure who became, in many ways, his political compass, Gopal Krishna Gokhale.
A major name in the moderate camp.
A huge name. Highly respected, an eminent moderate leader. Gokhale's philosophy championed constitutional reform, gradual progress, and this is absolutely crucial. He fervently believed in the necessity of cooperation between Hindus and Muslims for India's progress.
That unity piece was central for Gokhale.
Absolutely central. And Jinnah's admiration for Gokhale was immense and lifelong. He later explicitly called Gokhale his political mentor. That's a powerful statement.
It really is. Think about how significant finding a mentor like that can be, especially when you're just starting out in a new, complex field like politics. Gokhale wasn't just an ally. He seems to have provided a living example, a blueprint for principled political action.
Someone to look up to, definitely.
Yeah. What qualities of Gokhale do you think really resonated with Jinnah's own nature, that disciplined, precise, logical mind we've been talking about?
Well, Gokhale's emphasis on reasoned argument, his commitment to gradual, well-researched reform, his sheer intellectual rigor, that must have appealed immensely. And also his powerful vision of a united India, where different communities work together constructively. Gokhale famously spoke about wanting to see India on a level with the best of modern nations, that vision of progress through unity and diligent work.
That must have struck a chord.
Deeply, I suspect, and particularly that emphasis on cooperation between Hindus and Muslims. That detail really foreshadows Jinnah's own early political identity, the role he would soon embrace as a bridge builder. Think about mentors in your own life, how they can shape your initial path, provide that framework. Gokhale seems to have done that for Jinnah.
A foundational influence.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting. With Gokhale's guidance and example, Jinnah starts to articulate his own political voice. And it was a voice that, even in the Congress, filled with eloquent speakers, immediately stood out as distinct.
How so? What made it stand out?
Well, his voice was remarkably different because it directly reflected that legal training we keep coming back to.
Yeah.
His early speeches in Congress weren't, fiery calls to arms designed to stir passions. They were meticulously constructed arguments, almost like courtroom presentations.
Logical structure.
Exactly. Characterized by absolute clarity, noticeable restraint, and this unwavering reliance on logic, on reason. He used measured tones, apparently, deliberately avoiding the kind of inflammatory language that might whip up emotions but maybe muddy the actual point.
Substance over style, in a way. Or perhaps substance is style.
That's a good way to put it. He emphasized the rule of law, the pursuit of justice, and the vital need for cooperation among all Indians. He consistently argued that unity, regardless of religion, was essential if they were going to effectively demand reforms from the British. He wasn't just talking about unity, he was demonstrating a rational path to it through collective reason demands.
So appealing to minds, not just hearts.
Precisely. What's fascinating is that he wasn't trying to sway crowds with emotion or fervor like many politicians do. His goal seemed to be to convince people's intellects with precision, to build an irrefutable case with evidence and logic. Was this a long-term strategy or just his personality? Probably both, wouldn't you say?
Seems likely. A fusion of his training and his temperament.
I think so. His legal background ingrained that preference for structured argument, and it just extended naturally into his politics. He understood, perhaps, that lasting change needed more than just popular enthusiasm. It needed intellectual and legal weight behind it.
Which would certainly make him stand out.
It really did. Even among other moderates, who might sometimes use more passionate language, his approach was distinct. It positioned him not just as another politician, but as this lawyer-statesman, carefully building a national case, rather than, say, a fiery orator just stirring the pot. And this unique style quickly got him noticed, earned him recognition, and crucially, laid the foundation for a very specific identity within Indian politics.
It certainly did. People noticed, didn't they? While others were using passion, Jinnah was using precision. And that distinction, that unique approach, didn't just set him apart, it seemed to accelerate his rise. He was quickly recognized as a rising star, a lawyer-statesman entering politics.
That phrase again, lawyer-statesman.
It's so revealing, isn't it? It implies more than just being a politician who argues well. It suggests someone bringing legal expertise, intellectual rigor, a deep understanding of governance, a kind of seriousness to the whole art of statecraft. He was seen as committed to method, to principle, to long-term thinking, not just, political agitation or short-term gains. It suggested a respect for the rule of law, even while fighting for change.
A different kind of political animal.
Completely. So what does this tell us, perhaps, about starting out in politics? It really highlights the impact of being authentic, of having a distinct voice, especially in a crowded field. Jinnah wasn't just blending in, he was bringing this structured, logical, disciplined method into the often quite chaotic world of public debate.
He carved his own niche.
He really did. He wasn't just participating. He was kind of redefining the style of political engagement for many observers. And this deliberate, principled approach quickly built his reputation, earning him respect and, very importantly, a significant early title, a title that would resonate for years.
Yes, that title, Ambassador of Hindu-Muslim Unity. It's incredibly significant, marking his early political identity so clearly. And he didn't just talk about unity in vague terms. He offered a clear, compelling, and very strategic reason for it.
It wasn't just idealism.
Not just idealism, no. He argued, with that characteristic precision, that only a united India could effectively persuade the British to grant the necessary reforms. His warning was stark, pragmatic, almost like a lawyer laying out the risks. Division would undeniably weaken the collective cause. A divided India, he argued, would be easier for the British to manage, to ignore, to play off against itself.
So unity as a strategic imperative.
Exactly. When you look at the bigger picture, this shows a really strategic mind. He wasn't just advocating unity for purely moral reasons, though Gokhale's influence certainly included that moral dimension. He saw it as an absolute practical necessity for achieving concrete political goals against a powerful colonial opponent. It shows that deep understanding of power dynamics, of negotiation. It reinforces that lawyer-statesman identity, applying principles with a sharp eye on their real-world effectiveness. It does make you ask, how often is unity framed not just as the right thing to do, but as the strategically smart thing to do?
That's a great point.
Jinnah's argument encompassed both, which made it incredibly powerful at the time. It resonated with many across different communities who saw the logic in presenting a united front to the Raj.
And it was this dedication, this tireless work towards a unified front, towards Hindu-Muslim cooperation as a strategic necessity that earned him that title, Ambassador of Hindu-Muslim Unity.
A title given by others, reflecting his perceived role.
Exactly. It carries, as we know looking back, a certain poignant irony given later events, which are beyond our scope today. But we have to understand its huge significance then. This wasn't self-proclaimed. It was bestowed upon him, reflecting how people genuinely saw him as someone actively working to bridge divides, to forge that common ground. Sarojini Naidu, the poet and activist, famously used the term, but the feeling was already there.
It captured his mission at that time.
It really did, and the sources are explicit. At this early stage, Jinnah's politics were not separatists, they were fundamentally inclusive. His main concern was achieving justice for all Indians under the law, not favoring one group, but advocating for fair treatment and rights for everyone within that broad, diverse Indian identity.
A truly national vision initially.
Yes, a belief in a diverse but united India working together. And this commitment, it wasn't just abstract political ideals, it seemed deeply connected to his personal style, how he conducted himself in this new arena.
Absolutely. His personal style was, just like his speaking style, a direct extension of his professional persona as a barrister. And it had a real impact on his credibility and influence. He brought those hallmark traits in the courtroom straight into politics.
Such as?
Well, first, his impeccable dress. It was legendary. Always in elegant, perfectly tailored suits, never casual, never sloppy. Now, this wasn't just vanity, especially when some nationalist leaders were deliberately adopting simpler, more traditional clothes. It conveyed seriousness, professionalism, gravitas. It signaled he was a man prepared for formal engagement, someone to be taken seriously by the establishment.
Presentation mattered.
It did. It commanded respect visually. Secondly, his discipline. In public, he was remarkably restrained. He apparently spoke only when he felt it was absolutely necessary, but when he did, it was with force, clarity, and purpose. No rambling, no emotional tangents, no wasted words.
Economy of speech.
Exactly. That deliberate restraint made his interventions carry more weight. It wasn't the grandstanding you might see elsewhere. His power was in the precision. Thirdly, his integrity. He seemed to actively avoid flattery, which is pretty common in politics, let's be honest. He steered clear of political theatrics, focusing purely on the substance, the logical merits of the case. In a Congress often buzzing with passionate speeches, Jinnah stood out for this calm, rational, almost austere style.
Austere is a good word for it.
It is. He wasn't trying to win popularity contests. He was there to argue principles. What's fascinating is how that personal brand, built in the courtroom, transitioned so seamlessly into his public identity. It created this impression not of a rabble-rouser, but of a statesman in the making, someone dependable, principled, intellectually honest.
Which must have earned him a different kind of respect.
A very profound kind, I think, even from those who might disagree with him. It set him apart. So, okay, if we try to boil all this down, what are the real lasting lessons? The core principles that emerge from these very first crucial steps in his political life?
Yeah, let's try and distill that. Looking closely at this initial phase, 3 key lessons really do stand out, and they feel quite relevant even now. First, as you highlighted, is this unwavering focus on principle over popularity. The sources say he did not chase crowds, he chased truth. That fits perfectly with the austere style, the discipline, the focus on logic. It suggests this deep internal confidence in his own convictions, an unwillingness to compromise on what he thought was right, even if it wasn't the easiest or most popular stance to take.
Integrity driving action.
Seems like it. Second, very clearly, unity before division. His first instinct was cooperation between communities. This is such a critical point, especially knowing the later history. But fundamentally, at the start, he was a powerful advocate for a united front, for Hindus and Muslims collaborating. He saw it not just as morally right, but strategically essential for India's progress against colonial rule. It was foundational, earning him that ambassador title.
Central to his early vision.
Absolutely. And finally, this powerful idea of law as politics. He really embodied the notion that law and politics are not separate politics, is law applied to nations. This isn't just about his career path, it's about his whole conceptual framework. His legal training wasn't just prep work, it was the lens through which he viewed the entire political process. He approached national issues with the same rigor, precision, and respect for process that he'd apply in court.
A fascinating overlap.
It really is. Okay, let's just pause on this for our listeners. These aren't just dusty historical facts. They feel like timeless lessons about leadership, about ethical engagement, about strategic thinking. What stands out to you, listening now, about a leader who starts out prioritizing principle over popularity, whose first instinct is unity, not division, and who approaches governing with the discipline of law? It shows his entry into politics wasn't impulsive. It was a deliberate, principled, highly considered step into a profoundly new role.
That's a really effective summary of what we've covered. Muhammad Ali Jinnah's entry into politics, as the sources make clear, wasn't necessarily dramatic in the sense of a sudden explosion onto the scene, but it was absolutely decisive. It set a course. The Indian National Congress, in those early years, it really served as his essential training ground. It was his laboratory, if you like, for leadership, for testing those principles we've discussed. It was there he learned the complex art of political negotiation, truly grasped the weight of representing millions, and tackled firsthand the huge challenges of trying to unite incredibly diverse communities under one banner.
A real learning curve.
A steep one, no doubt. He honed his skills right there in the crucible of India's growing national aspirations. And even though we know his path later diverged significantly from the Congress, that early involvement left a permanent mark on him and on the political landscape itself.
It shaped him irrevocably.
I believe so. It established him in the public consciousness as this man of principle, of moderation, and so strikingly in this early phase, as a champion of unity. The disciplined barrister from Bombay, known for his sharp legal mind, had transformed himself, through these first crucial steps, into a politician of India. Armed with a clear vision, that a distinct style, and a set of principles that would, in various ways, guide him for decades to come.
Yeah.
We've really seen how those initial steps were driven by that belief in constitutionalism, that powerful commitment to unity, and that unwavering personal integrity. Hopefully, understanding this gives you, our listener, a much richer, more nuanced view than just knowing the famous name. It highlights those often overlooked foundational chapters, showing where the core beliefs of major historical figures really started to form.
It definitely adds depth.
And as we wrap up this deep dive today, it does leave us with a rather compelling thought to ponder.
Indeed it does. We've spent this time exploring Jinnah's early political life, seeing a leader deeply committed at the outset to unity and to legal process as the best way forward. So what does it really mean when a leader, right at their beginning, champions these specific ideals, unity and constitutionalism, as the cornerstones of their entire vision? It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much do those initial formative principles truly end up shaping a leader's whole trajectory? Even when the political world shifts dramatically around them, throwing up completely unexpected challenges, changing the alliances, changing the game, is the seed of everything that follows, the essence of their future actions, somehow always present in those first deliberate steps? Just waiting, perhaps, for the right conditions, or maybe the wrong ones, to sprout and grow into something far larger, far more complex than anyone, including perhaps the leader themselves, could ever have foreseen at the very start. Something to think about as we consider the long, winding path of history and the figures who shape it.